Right. Hello, everybody. My name is Martha Alter-Hines. I have the biggest treat ever. I'm here with Melanie Reinhart and Chris Skidmore, and we are about to have a conversation that I'm sure will journey in many directions. But the underlying theme we're going to be talking about today is Pluto and Aquarius and these Aquarian times. And I think our intention really is to try to hold space for this moment that we're in. Pluto has we're recording this on November 26th, 2024, and Pluto just moved into Aquarius exactly a week ago, actually. And so we're in this moment, and I think our intention is really to, like Chris was just saying before we started recording, really to be present and attune to this time that we're in, really hold space for this moment that we're all in as a collective, and feel into what is this? Where are we? And what are some I don't know, what are some parts of this journey that we can attune to in a way that will help us navigate now in the most grounded, aligned, hopeful way that we can. Yeah, so welcome everybody. So glad you're here, and I already know this is going to be amazing because our conversations always are. It's inevitable. Yeah, so where do we want to start?
At the beginning.
The beginning. Here we are. I'll also just contextualize for everybody, because again, if this is your first time seeing the three of us together, you probably haven't heard us say this, but just to contextualize where we are in the world and in our days. So I happen to be in California, United States. And for me, it is, we started our conversation at 5 o'clock in the morning, my time. And then Melanie is in the UK. And for her, when we started, it was at 1 p.m. And then Chris is in Bali. And for him, it was 9 p.m. when we started. By now it's 10 p.m. So we're spanning the world literally as we have this conversation. And I always like to just point out that I think the three of us are so dedicated to having this conversation that I'm willing to get up at 3 a.m. and Chris is willing to stay up until whatever time, because yeah, it's just so good being with the two of you together, and so much love and appreciation for both of you. So that's the context that we're in here, which I think is always important to name. All right, now let's start. Yeah, what would be, I can start with this question for either of you. When you drop in and you feel and you attune to this moment we're in, Pluto just having gone into Aquarius and all the rest of it, what's the first thing that arises? Where are we? What is this?
So when you phrase your question like that, what came into my mind immediately was the image of the white eagle. We had a little discussion about that before we started recording. So the eagle is sometimes considered as part of the symbolic landscape of the sign of Scorpio, it being a kind of transcended and yes, elevated version of the energy of Scorpio, with its intensity and desire desire to penetrate falsehood and to reach the truth. And so the bird itself It's almost like the bird itself, excuse me, has flown along to the next fixed sign, which is Aquarius. And of course, it is an air sign. So part of the terrain of challenge is that can be associated with fixed ideas. So fixed air equals fixed ideas. And of course, that's totally not what the whole sign of Aquarius is about. But it's a very interesting edge to play with. And seems to me already, and I know Pluto's only been sort of finally in Aquarius for about a week, but I seem to be noticing in myself and people I'm communicating with, there's an edge where our fixed ideas are apparent, where we stumble on our own fixed ideas, or where you can feel the energy kind of congealing into something stuck and fixed. And it's quite revealing to, out of curiosity, see if you can find those edges in yourself. And I began to notice that sometimes when I listen to the radio, just since Pluto went into Aquarius, I became aware that I have this whole conversation going on in my own mind. It's not really a conversation, but it's like I'm reacting with opinions and judgments and all of that as I listen to the radio. I mean, this really sounds insane, but I know I'm not the only one on the planet who does that kind of stuff. And it's really quite shocking and quite revealing. And to take the time to actually really examine that. It's like, wow, what happened when I just heard that news bulletin? And the judgment or the opinion or the kind of, well, I know better and you guys are just dumb, that kind of thing. And of course, as I said, I'm not the only one, but this goes on all the time as to how we hear, how we receive things, both just in personal communications or in terms of what we're taking in from the media. And there's also somewhere in there a kind of like a monitor that's trying to get us to pay attention when we kind of know when something is off. And I think we override that at our peril, but it always beckons for a deeper kind of inquiry, because Aquarius being the last of the air signs, it's pretty global or stratospheric or cosmic in its view. And it can happen that in reaching that kind of a view, we also, quote unquote, leave behind all kinds of other aspects of our human life, our feelings, our senses, even our intuitions, and we go, like a vertical ascent. And yet something more subtle is called for, I think, through this sign.
Chris, go.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot of things came up as you were speaking, Melanie, and the first thing I just wrote down is because, well, actually several things all at once, and this is part of the problem. But the white eagle, to me, I started to follow that white eagle, and I just started to follow the image because it just like started flying off for a second as you brought it forward, like that metalog, it started to happen. And then I was thinking about these words. I've always had all three of us, I think we really enjoy our fun with words, a little bit of play. But these words like overview and then to oversee and then oversight. So all words about over and then something to do with vision, but such different words, right? To get an overview of something, and then to oversee something, and then the oversights that happen. And isn't it fascinating that the word oversee and the word oversight should be so similar, right? Because I mean that it's just the same word, is it not? And overview is also quite similar, and yet they're very different feelings. And I think within this realm, as we do take the ascension, because the other thing about the white eagle, or the Aquila, as it is in the constellations, was the eagle that came down at the behest of Zeus to take Ganymede, the boy, and take him up. And so there is that sense of going up here and being taken by the eagle and being taken up. And so I was just feeling that as far as like that gives us the overview, but it also gives us a lot of oversights, like a lot of things that we will miss by leaving, by taking that vertical sort of elevator ride up. And I think that's one of the many tensions that is in this kind of time and in this feeling. And it's an uncomfortable, like you say, that edge of our fixed ideas. There's an edge there. And it's funny because you said the edge becomes apparent, and Brian Clark always plays with apparent as apparent. So
Oh, yes. Yes, of course.
he always loves that one. So that fixed idea becomes apparent, and
Yes.
and there is that sense of becoming kind of like, yeah, we can sort of feel, I know I'm throwing a lot of things around right at the start here, but maybe we just need to throw them all up and just kind of like see where they all land, a little bit like the rocks over the shoulder, right? Like see where they all land, see what it's going to have energy. But it can be like that, that movement into becoming, because I do think about Aquarius as also quite an authoritarian, like authoritative, that can also become authoritarian, in the sense that it can be that it can be a stuck energy, can't it? It can, but it also, we need this energy in the world, because we need people that are like you talked about before we came on air, the 3 air signs. So we start with Gemini. There's a lot of like, twinning, as you said. The twins of Gemini are born from these 2 eggs, and inside the 2 eggs are twos, and the twos become twos, and the twins marry twins, and all this kind of thing, right? So there's that kind of like, oh, well, let's just experiment and see what it is. And then Libra, as you said, is like, now the opposites want to come together. So they're really interested in each other now. And then they want to make, as you said, like sacred vows with each other, like marriage. Let's not do that again. Let's not split off again. But then we move into Aquarius, and somehow we have to hold all of that. And I think, given that it is the last of the air signs, it's necessary to have some fixed ideas in there, isn't it? Like that, we were talking before about what is the world, and it's necessary to have some fixed ideas within that. But also it's necessary to break free of those fixed ideas. And I think this is where that edginess is. In process-oriented psychotherapy, there's the idea that you have like the primary identity, that's the I am. And then there's a secondary identity on the other side of this wall, this kind of like, which is called the edge. And in order to become a whole person, we have to be able to approach the edge, so we can sort of like rescue these exiled parts, because if we don't see that thing over there that I'm saying, no, that's definitely not me, the not I over there is also part of the I construct. If we're not able to do that, we're not able to become whole. And I see that in the world of like this splitting off that's happened, and the wall between it's this fractioned in so many ways, and that's very easy to see. You can just look anywhere at the moment. It just feels like you can look at almost any direction to see that. And there's something of the ability to see as that final air sign of like, well, I know I am this is my primary identity. I know I have an edge to get to that other identity, and that secondary identity looks like it's becoming kind of evil or demonic or bad. But that's also a part of me. That's also something that I need to kind of get closer to that edge, even though it's uncomfortable, so that I can discover a more well-rounded whole. And I think it becomes increasingly difficult as we enter Aquarius because of the fixed nature of the sign, because it's fixed nature. It doesn't really want to give up its position. Like, that's my experience of it. Doesn't really want to give up its position, and it feels like it'd be really threatening to do that, because it may just go back to Gemini, right? It may mean that everything is anything, and you know, like hyper relativism. It doesn't want to do that. It wants to be really clear. That's why it does rule over things like mathematical formulas and sciences and technologies. It's like, needs to make very clear, definitive statements. But as it's making those clear, definitive statements, it also makes subtle unconscious statements. And I think that's where the Pluto comes in, where I am also that thing that I have exiled. I am also that thing that I've put into the basement, you know. And how are we going to begin to reckon with that? Because it's only the beginning. It's only, you know, we're a week in for a very, very long 20-year
Yeah.
process. We're a week in.
Yeah, well,
It's
we
new.
have until 2044
So we
for
got a bit of time.
this part of the journey.
Oh my.
So
Melanie.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I felt like I said lots of things there, but I just wanted to bring in a couple of images as well, and these little plays on words. Like, I don't know if you guys also feel the essence of that, like overview, oversee, oversight.
Mm.
Definitely.
You know, on the level of of psychological dynamics, I've certainly noticed that the field of Aquarius is a sign where whatever planet is placed in that sign tends towards politicizing what are actually personal feelings. And in a way, that is the beginning of the split you were referring to, Chris, you know? So our own emotional reactivity, which might in fact be a veil over a really painful area in the soul, if that becomes politicized, then it's like the mind takes over, and then we have to prove that we are right and the other guy's wrong. And, you know, once we're at that stage of that process, it becomes a bit of a lost cause, really, because the source within ourselves may be an area of real wounding or tenderness within the soul that we, for whatever reason, are keeping at bay. And so, in the process of doing that, we politicize our feelings.
Mm.
And I think for me, I think that Pluto going into Aquarius may actually help us unpick that, so that we can connect with, okay, what are the personal feelings invested in this, and what are their source as distinct from, this is what I think and I have to be right, or this political party's right, or that political party's right, and so on. That's the end stage of a whole long process of personal experience, really.
Yeah. I can say a couple of things.
How to kind of sort of remake the personal as personal rather than continually collectivizing it and politicizing it. And that's
Mm.
in no way denying the relevance and the power of the collective context within which we're operating. But being able to see through that is not about making somebody wrong. It may be more about tracing what we've invested in our notion that we have to be right, if you see what I mean.
Mm.
Yeah. When I sit with, again, so again, before we started recording, at the very end, right before we came on recording, Chris mentioned this need to be in attunement with our time, right? Which put me in the mode of the craniosacral therapist that is in me, that is in Chris. And so if I'm sitting here in that kind of mode, just holding this more like Cherokloish space for our moment in time, one thing I notice in me is this a little bit of a like a feeling of struggle to balance both being committed to holding space for the wholeness of everything on the one hand. So what you're saying, Melanie, that not splitting off, not overly politicizing things, not sort of projecting my own stuff onto outside stuff, and holding the reality that we're all here together. And then at the same time, a commitment I also have in myself to not, I think to not minimize when things are truly wrong in my feelings, right? And so I think that's probably a struggle a lot of us, or maybe all of us, are sitting with, is both the desire to be present with ourselves as love and ourselves as the totality of everything, the wholeness of everything, and yet also notice the nuances of what's actually going on and be attuned to all of it at the same time, right? The wholeness and the dance. um I feel Aquarian themes in all of that, but yeah, I don't know if either of you have anything you want to say about any of that.
Yeah, it makes me think about like the word that came up when both of you were talking in different ways was the word belonging. And
Mm.
and the longing to belong, the deep sense, like, and so that can, in Aquarius, I think that can become well, where's my tribe? Because then if I can get together with my tribe, I can feel like, now I belong. But the tribe always also has to have an enemy tribe, in order to feel that, and so then it splits off again. But there is something of the collective consciousness of Aquarius that wants that, right? It's not Leo, right? It's the opposite of Leo. Leo is attempting to be just kind of like, I'll be me, and then that'll be that kind of thing, like I'll just shine bright, although the self needs the audience as well. So there's that kind of like performer audience thing going on between Aquarius and Leo that's really interesting to track, and how the leader and the people come together as well. That's really interesting to track in this dynamic. But I think that belonging, like I think if we can understand that, like it's a central part of like why we are all splitting off is because we all want to belong. That's really what's going on. That's why we're heading towards each other and the people who have similar views, similar fixed ideas to me. And then we can make an enemy of the others. And isn't that even a better way to become like more belonging? Because now we have an enemy camp. And that's like the thing that you're not talking about, Martha, in a sense, right? Like you're trying to come back, you're trying to go under that and feel under that. So I can feel sort of like the Piscean in you, which is obviously the next sign along to be like, to bring in the oneness of things. So the Aquarius isn't quite there yet, so what are we to do then? If there is a sense of needing to belong, and that sense does come down to within Aquarius, like, well, where's my people? How does that not become war lines? Because you can see the way that those two parallel lines of the glyph, they don't touch. They never will touch. So there can be that kind of real deep separation. It's like, I mean, it can, and that can be really solidified in Aquarius in a way, can't it? Even though ultimately it's a humanitarian sign, and we get that sense that it wants to get the sense of like, we are the world. It really wants that. But in its attempt to get that, it splits off into tribes, I think. That's the thing that I'm sort of recognizing as I'm listening to you guys speak.
Right. Yeah. So okay, so in Aquarius, there is this ideal of an idealism, right? There is this aspect of Aquarius that does want this sort of we are the world feeling, and yet in another level, Pisces is where the we are the world actually resides-ish. I mean, it can reside in Aquarius, but right, it's like how do we mm, mm. I have so many questions in there. And I just want to throw in, we do also have Chariklo in Aquarius right now, in the mid degrees of Aquarius. As we talked about in a previous video, the Pluto enters the beginning of Aquarius, but Chariklo is down the line already, sort of waiting there. Anyway, so all of this ties in with it, and I'm not articulating all the ties, but Melanie, did you want to jump in with something? Were you thinking something?
I was thinking something, but it vanished.
Oh, do you kind
Well,
of get
it's like what
Oh, I know
Melanie.
what
Oh,
I
okay, go
know.
on.
I know what it was. The sense of tribe as connected with Aquarius. Um, I used to think of Aquarius as the sign of the non-blood family.
Hmm.
So that can be um, any kind of a group that is joined in unity by some shared ideal, a task that has to be completed, a set of explicit ideals or beliefs, and so on and so forth. But it's the non-blood family. But thing is that if you hang around in the non-blood family long enough, you will meet every single member of your own family right there in the present in your so-called non-blood family,
Hmm.
because it's the place where the things that we think we've separated from, like, oh, well, I left home when I was 14, 15, 16, 20, whatever it was. I left home, or I left my country. But what we don't realize is that it follows you. And there's a whole other process of refinement of understanding and of separating at an energy level that's much more subtle than just waving goodbye to your family on the doorstep kind of thing. And there are things that we hold onto for dear life, including ideas and beliefs that perhaps qualify for the label of a fixed idea, you know. Uh, and that kind of a process of separating, I think, is very much in the field of Aquarius, except that we keep trying to do it literally
Hmm.
without actually giving enough time for the more subtle levels of insight and understanding and internal inquiry to see what's really going on there. And so it is a very broad field. And your remark, Chris, there about, well, where it's going, so to speak, where Aquarius is going, to me is always fascinating to think of the signs of the zodiac sequentially and to just sort of see where one sign has come from and where they are going to, you know.
Hmm.
If we look at them that way, uh, well, Aquarius has come from Capricorn, 100% ruled by Saturn, and it's going to Pisces, which traditionally was ruled by Jupiter, and now we add in Neptune in the rulership. And in a way, perhaps that's part of what makes the fixedness so fixed, because we're going from something really solid that we can name and say, I am this, I work as that, I was born here, born there, this is what I do, here's my place in the world. We're going from that at some level, even if you think you're rebelling against it, because, oh no, that doesn't matter to me. But actually, we have our defined place. And we're going to the great ocean of existence. And sort of in the middle is the Aquarian place with its dual rulership. And it's going, oh no, oh no, you mean I have to let go of all this solidness, this mountain I climbed, and so forth. So it's kind of stuck in the middle. And the feeling of being stuck in the middle and feeling that one, by leaning right or left, whether you mean that politically or in other ways, that there's a kind of betrayal involved. That's a kind of dilemma of Aquarius, of kind of knowing that that investing everything in that horizontal level, be it individual or collective, is not the whole story. And then that's maybe supplanted by the upwardly mobile effort. Chris, when you mentioned about Ganymede being fetched by the eagle of Zeus, that reminded me. I thought, oh yeah, you can't do Uranus to order. It comes as a blast of grace and shifts your level of perception to a higher, wider, broader, freeing view or perception. And I think if you struggle to do it to order, then all you get is ideology and dogma and technology as well, to try to fix that insight into something I can get hold of and I can explain or make money out of. And meanwhile, it's a kind of blast of grace that comes. Uranus is an outer planet, so we can't do the outer planets to order. Like we can't, like you could say, well, as regards Mercury or something, we know it may be a good thing. Well, a Mercury Saturn influence, we know it might be really useful thing to write a list and prioritize the things that we need to do. But when it comes to the energies of the outer planets, we can't um, we can't work with them in the same way. But of course, we want to. And so we end up literalizing things in this way that can be very alienating to the soul.
That's bringing in for me Uranus currently being in Taurus, right? Again, this like fixed fixed energy.
Yeah.
And then in this coming year, going to be, of course, moving back and forth between Taurus into Gemini, and then back into Taurus, and then into Gemini. And by June of 2026, Uranus will be squaring the nodes of the moon at 2 degrees of Gemini. Anyway, that's a whole thing right there in and of
That is a whole thing for
that's a
sure.
whole thing. Right as the nodes are going to be switching signs, which is like, wow, just like Pluto did in June of 2023, right? When Pluto was squaring the nodes as the nodes were switching signs too, right? Anyway, fascinating little turn of events there. But as Uranus is now the traditional, or the modern ruler of Pluto, it's also in this trine with Pluto, as Uranus is going to be doing the dance between Taurus and Gemini. So that's a whole thing I've been feeling into, is what is that relationship? And I don't know if there's anything you feel called to bring in about any of that. That's a whole topic in and of itself, but that's popping in for me.
Yeah, something you're talking about there, Melanie, is about the therefore, if these are outer planets, and the reckoning is happening with the outer planets, then yeah, it does come in a flash. Like Uranian energy does come in a flash, and then it comes in a flash, and then Saturn comes along after and goes, okay, well, let's put this here, that there, like, well, we'll order that, get all that together, and then it means this, right? And it's like,
Yes.
well, I mean, your ass is always like, I guess, not exactly, because it just like, boom, you got it all in one, right? Like Ganymede
Yes.
suddenly is taking, you gotta, I think if we follow Ganymede up, and then it's this boy who suddenly arrives into the chamber of the gods, and how overwhelming an experience that is. These are all
Yeah.
the gods suddenly.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, like this is reality then. This is how it all works, you know? And left behind on the earth is Tros, his father, the king of Troy, who's just like, what the hell was that? Like, where did he go? And this is kind of like a dynamic internally that I think that part of the Uranus Aquarius kind of phenomena is. It's about that, of like the tension inside of one of us kind of wants to be a parent, and one of us wants to have the flash of lightning, right? Oh shit, I get it. And then one's on the earth and one's up in the sky somewhere, and they're split off from each other. And there's like this sense of like, well, what use is that big flash that you've got if you're not like putting it in here it's trying to bring it back to Capricorn. Like, okay, what are you building? What are you making? What are you doing with it? What's the system? What's the structure? Let's go. Uranus is
And
like, I'm more interested in smashing structures than I am in making them actually. I'm lightning, you know? And how those kind of energies can be in the one sign is in that little bit of a myth, which we got to remember is in the myth to Aphrodite. It's the first thing, it's the first story she tells in the Homeric hymn to Aphrodite. She tells the story of Ganymede because she tells it as a love story. She tells it as Zeus's love for this boy, actually. It's one of many love stories that is referred to in that hymn. So there's splits and there's love, right? Like, I mean, that's all. There's a grand love in Aphrodite in Aquarius. I think there's a really grand love there, and there's a grand love for all of humans, like agape. That kind of love, that level of love. But the reaching out to receive and be in that kind of love is like putting all those extra volts through your system. Can you manage that? Can you handle that, or will it just fry you? You know?
I'll just point out that I think it's so fascinating, of course, that Saturn just went direct at the same day of the full moon on November 15th. The full moon was conjunct Uranus 4 days before Pluto entered Aquarius, right? So those two rulers, so Saturn, the ruler of Capricorn, which is where Pluto was on that day, but then the traditional ruler of Aquarius, where Pluto was heading, went direct on the same day. There was that very powerful full moon conjunct Uranus. So both were so much in play on that full moon just before Pluto went into Aquarius. And I'll also just throw in on a personal level, I have Uranus sitting straight on my own Jupiter in Taurus. So I know all these things very personally, and I'm feeling a lot as you're both speaking, but yeah, so go. Who wants to think? Yeah. And of course, Saturn is in Pisces as it's going direct, right? So it's like we've got all these players.
I'm really feeling that Saturn right now,
Me
because I
too.
mean the big I mean, yeah, and of course that's also personal in where it's hitting in my chart and everything like that. But obviously the headliner right now, Pluto and Aquarius, right? That's the headliner.
Mhm.
But that switch of Saturn as it turned direct, I mean that to me felt like whoa, something about that. I don't even know how to describe that one. That was the energy that I was really attuned to because yeah, the big Pluto and Aquarius thing happening in the world, massive everything, bing bang, all the stuff. It's that subtle shift at 12 degrees of Pisces of, there was something subtle happening. There was
Yeah.
kind of like there was this other thing going on,
Yeah.
you know? And that's what on a soul level, I was like, what is this though? Because it's so much more subtle, this thing that's happening. And I do think, one of the things in that myth that I get pulled towards is like there's no real grieving process. That the father-son split doesn't involve a grieving process. Because, Ganymede's dad, Troyes, he's just given some horses that can run on water. And it's like, there you go, take these horses. And by the way, your son's immortal, don't worry about it. And he goes, okay, and he was happy. And you compare that to the hymn to Demeter and the Demeter Persephone. I mean, it's like one of the classic hymns because of a grieving process. The whole thing is about grief. So the mother-daughter split is this agonizing, like emotional kind of like wave after wave of process. You know, there's all this stuff that happens in it. And the father-son split is just like, oh, pretty sad. But you know, it's like it doesn't have the feeling in it. And so I think that that is in some ways felt in Saturn for some reason, that Saturn movement um felt very significant to me. Martha, show us the key stats.
I just want to show you what was going on with Ceres as Pluto was the day. This is the day that,
Oh,
yeah. So Ceres now is, in this part of Capricorn. And yeah, is just in this fascinating place. Kind of in this brings in the Chiron aspect too, because anyway, long story short, basically Ceres is in this 23, 24, now 26 degrees of Capricorn, which is where Pluto has been, right? And squaring this area where Chiron now is doing its dance. So this whole, yeah, something about the Ceres energy, just, I agree, feels really important. And I just want to show you where it is, where it happened. It is here. It is with us. So, yeah, and it's about to enter Aquarius with Pluto and actually Venus coming along. I think the three of them are going to be basically conjunct pretty soon. But yeah, just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, the line that's coming up for me is like with Venus coming in there as well. You know, we split off from each other because we love each other, or we split off and then we love each other. You know, it's something of when you said before, Melanie, before we were on air, by the way, or listeners, we were having a fantastic conversation. We're still having a fantastic conversation. But anyway, Melanie was referring to that thing of like Gemini twinning, and then Libra, the attraction back to that opposite. And just feeling that. And I think once we get to Aquarius, we get to a whole nother level of love, actually. I think love is at the center of all of that. This deep longing. And the fact that then it splits off is like the great tragedy. It's the great tragic love story, you know. And that's what I feel because it has to hold its position, you know. It's kind of like those, you know, it's the Romeo and Juliet. It's like it falls in love with the other side, but it also has to hold its position, and then all the tragedy kind of like erupts out of that. Because it is still a fixed sign. It's not willing to just be mutable about it. It's not going to be Piscean or Gemini about it. It's going to be Aquarian. And so the energy in that split becomes extra charged. And I think if Pluto's job is revelation, conceal, reveal, I think that's Pluto's basic game. Pluto wore a helmet of invisibility, and so therefore could take it off and put it back on. Then I think it's the revealing of just the absolute energy behind that. And we all know the cliches, you know, the power of love and everything, but that power can also just be like so intense a feeling that it actually adds to the splitting. And again, you know, a lot of that, I think the reality of the world, which is another Aquarian concept we were talking about, is that we just really love each other, and that's why we hate each other.
And I was telling you, Chris, this recently, but in my own praying, right, I keep getting shown this. My guides keep telling me, go back to the beginning of time when go back to the beginning of time when I can't remember the exact wording, but basically they show me coming out of source as a drop, splitting into the two, right? The feminine and the masculine of me. And my guides keep telling me this is like crucial for me, but crucial for our world. Go back to the beginning of time, before time existed, when you first said I love you to yourself. Basically, like the feminine and the masculine first noticed, like they first became the two, And then they turned to each other and had this recognition of love between the two. And so over and over and over and over again in my praying, that's mine to do, is that level of recognition of love and going back to that original love, right? The very first split that we ever do in when we choose to incarnate is that choice to be now experience ourselves as separate. So I'm thinking about like Gemini. In Gemini, there is a purpose to the split, right? That we're here incarnated not to just experience Pisces forever and ever and ever. Otherwise, we would just be Pisces, you know? So there's this purpose in the Gemini duality. But then I'm also curious to feel into with the Aquarius that there's also a purpose in the duality, but then holding space for the oneness at the same time we're in the duality, right? There's again, there's more questions than answers there for me, but yeah, anything there for either of you in that?
Well, what occurs to me is something along the lines of what I said a little bit earlier about, Uranus and the blast of grace, or as Chris put it, the lightning. Talking at the level of the outer planets and the signs that they rule, we can be afforded glimpses, and grace can bestow on us experiences of the states that are represented by Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. But there's a way in which we can't live there, meaning we can't go there, but over time we can embrace and imbibe the states of consciousness which we've been given by grace, so that they are within us. We are imbued with them. We don't have to fight to get there because there isn't anywhere to go, you know? So when I was listening to you, Martha, describe that very poignant process of the one becoming the two, and how in a way the recognition of duality, it does seem to be part of our curriculum, so to speak, on this planet. So being able to discern duality with discernment is essential as a quality of consciousness. But it's when the duality becomes overlain with the residue of our own pain of various separations that we recall,
Yes.
then it becomes a different kind of animal.
Yes.
Then it becomes, well, somebody's got to be right, therefore somebody's wrong. I have to be the one who's right. And we know that whole story. But just the raw, basic discernment of duality, I almost feel like maybe in the field of Gemini, that's part of the task, is to reach a level of discernment where the dualities that we perceive are not overladen with, eons of emotional baggage from our own experience.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Because, if we're at the stage of duality and we've had a glimpse of oneness and we want it, we want to go there, get it back, not let it go, etc., we end up feeling that we are the one. In other words, we inflate. Yeah, that's what came to mind as I was watching you describe the oneness and the two-ness.
That's precisely what my prayers essentially say, is when they say go back to the beginning of time before time existed, right? What they're really trying to get me to do, but I think also hold space for in the world, is that there is this, it does feel very Uranian, Aquarian, and Piscean, but Uranian and Aquarian too, this this way of having an energetic template in my being, and like where we can all remember this template of what is that before time, right? Before any trauma, before any, oh, this duality means now we're going to fight. No,
Mhm.
in the beginning of time, the duality had nothing to do with fighting. The duality in that ultimate level, the thing, what I feel in my being when I'm in that place, when they take me there, is overwhelming, unbelievably powerful love, period. Just like so
Mm.
much love, I can't even, like I just lose it. I start crying, it's so powerful. And that's ultimately what that duality energy is,
Yeah.
right?
You know, in the esoteric astrology of Alice Bailey, Gemini is ruled by Venus.
Oh,
Oh, yes. And to me, what you've just described, I'm reminded of that listening to what you've just described. So that, the ultimate destination, let's say, of the recognition of duality and the discernment of difference is exactly love. Because in a way, that is the way in which the opposites, the dualities, etc., can be included. They can't necessarily be so by argument or philosophy or anything like that. But at the level of love and the heart, they can be. And while we're on the subject of the esoteric rulers, the esoteric ruler of Aquarius is Jupiter.
Mm.
Now, for me, another mind blower,
Yeah.
because amongst many other things, Jupiter is a planet of synthesizing opposites. It's the
Mm.
opposite planet. Rules Sagittarius, the opposite sign to Gemini. So Sagittarius is all about synthesizing, bringing things to a point of focus, and so on. And so that kind of lies neatly alongside the notion of the Saturn-Uranus dilemma with the rulerships of Aquarius. If you say, well, okay, with the Saturn-Uranus tango, pretty much we do what we can and we go as far as we go. And then by grace, maybe, poof, there comes Jupiter. And suddenly we're on another level. Now, Jupiter is, of course, not an outer planet, meaning that it is an experience that we can encompass in a way that we can't necessarily with the vibrations of the outer planets,
Mm.
And to me, that brings the whole notion of awakening, which is for me one of the key words of a Uranus in Aquarius. Brings the whole notion of awakening somewhat closer. And in traditional astrology, Jupiter is exalted in the sign of Cancer, meaning that the expansiveness and generosity and sense of increase that Jupiter often signifies, when brought within the field of Cancer, it brings contact with the feelings. Cancer is the first water sign. So that's a little trail that comes to me as I listen.
Chris, I want to hear what you're feeling and thinking. I just want to show one more thing.
Mhm.
This, as you're describing the eagle and Aquila and Sagittarius and all of it, I just want to say, here's the image I'm getting in my mind as you're describing all that. Here is can you guys see the stellarium on the screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's the
Yeah.
constellation of Aquila, right? Which is in the Milky Way. And then Sagittarius, the constellation, which is where Venus happens to be right now, has, of course, its arrow pointing straight into the Milky Way. And we happen to be in the time of the year right now when we're recording this where the sun is heading into all of this, right? So anyway, it's just, again, more questions than answers, but I was getting this image and I just wanted to bring it in because it's so beautiful and powerful for me. Like, wow, there is that eagle right here sitting in the Milky Way. That's where it is in the sky. Yeah. All right. Chris, what are you feeling? What's up for you?
Yeah, so it's when you said, Martha, like go back before time, it brings up like really at the center of my exploration of Aquarius over the years has been paradox. Because of course to go before time is a time word to get back before, right? So that's why I think the labyrinth is such a good descriptor of Aquarian energy, especially as you said, Melanie, as its placement between or after Capricorn, right? Because Daedalus is the great architect, and I consider him to be, he's a builder and an architect, and I consider him to be he's a Capricornian figure in that he's great with his hands, but he's also an Aquarian figure. And we got to remember that the reason he was in Crete in the first place is because his apprentice started to get very, very, very good. And he was worried about that. And so he threw his apprentice off the tower. Right? And so we get that image of the tower, which I always think is a Uranian image, right? The tarot card of the tower. And because he's thrown him off the tower, the Athenians don't want to have anything to do with him anymore. So he's exiled from Athens, and he ends up in Crete. And then he builds this labyrinth, right? Like his eventually his story comes to be to build this labyrinth. So almost like, as you were saying, Melanie, like the eagle comes out of Scorpio, and then the eagle could easily be that Sagittarian eagle. And then we're so kind of like full of Jupiterian spirit in Sagittarius that we just have like lots of great expansive ideas about things. And then it's like, okay, so put it into Capricorn. Let's get these ideas going. And we see, well, some are going to grow and some are not going to grow, actually. Some are going to work and some are not going to work. And if we bring it to the earth, some of those Sagittarians ideas are just kind of lofty and they float away like gas balloons, like they just float off. And some of them do work, right? And Aquarius is trying to take those ideas that do work and make it into a system. But way back there in Scorpio, there may be some injuries. There may be some wounds, there may be some pains that haven't actually been handled, that haven't actually been dealt with. And those are those personal ones, Melanie, that by the time we get to Aquarius are becoming politicized. It's like, okay, or you could just say I'm in pain. I think so much of the pain that goes into the world could just be like, yeah, I'm in pain because the human experience is full of tragedy. We kind of need, in my mind, mythology that reflects that we have tragedy in all of our lives. And that's kind of the beauty. That's the thing that keeps us all together, actually, is that we're all in that wounding, the Chiron sort of experience. But it's also interesting in that labyrinth myth that eventually Daedalus builds this labyrinth and he gets imprisoned in it. So that to me is an Aquarian mythologem, right? Like he built the labyrinth. So you'd think like, well, you built the thing. They can't imprison you in this thing because you built it. And actually, the Aquarian truth is I built the thing and now I'm imprisoned in it. So he gets locked in there and he can't find his way out. He's too good at building the construct. He's too good at hiding the Minotaur, right? He's too good at hiding the pain. He's too good at hiding the shame. The construct he built was very, very good. He doesn't even know anymore. And he gets locked in there with his son Icarus. And so you get this, that's also, that father-son dynamic, I think, because I've been really feeling into whether Aquarius Leo is that father-son dynamic. I've just been kind of like sitting with that for a while. I haven't kind of like read much about that, but I get a sense or a hint that there's a father-son split that goes on. It's definitely in the myth of Ganymede. And it's there between Daedalus and Icarus as well, because we all know Icarus's story, but we don't really know Daedalus is there too, also flying. And Daedalus, with his maturity, is able to fly through the air. He's able to fly with his wings. He's able to break out of the labyrinth that he built. He couldn't find another way out, but he can fly out. He brings his son with him too, though. And rather than showing his son, right? This is how you fly. I'll be right behind you. I'll be around. I'll be around to help you. He goes, follow me. Follow me. Which Icarus can't do. He doesn't know how to, he's too young, he's too youthful. He doesn't know how to do that. And so that creates that great tragedy of Icarus, where firstly he actually flies too close to the water and then his wings get wet. Because we always think he's mesmerized by the sun. I like the version where he's flown so close to the water, so he's gotten so close to that emotional thing that's going on. He's like, oh my God, I'm flying. This is so full on. And then because he's so full of the water in his wings, he gets closer to the sun to dry them out. And as he goes closer and closer to the sun, it does dry his wings out, but it also melts the wax. And he falls down to the ocean. And then we got, the journey does go into grief. There is a deep grief of Daedalus for his son Icarus. I've got a lot of mythic themes going on here, but what I like about that when I think about Aquarius is like that idea that, well, I built this thing, if we take it into the eye for whoever's, take it into your own eye. We all built our own constructs. And usually we built it just like Daedalus built it. We did it to hide some shame. We did it to, because there's certain things we didn't want to feel. Certain things we didn't want to see, because the Minotaur who's at the middle of that is that image, the thing we didn't really want to see. We'd rather lock that away somewhere. But now, even though I built it, I can get locked in it, and that's the fixed air, right? I can get locked in that thing, in my own creation, in my own creation. Now, take that out to the world level, and that's what I think we're kind of like in, like, oh man, we need a reset. We used to have resets, like, I mean, it's not that long ago, a few hundred years ago, Saturnalia, before that was called Chronalia. Well, actually, after Saturnalia, it was called the Feast of Fools. And in those 12 days in between the solar and the lunar calendars, they'd switch out all the rules of society. The masters become the slave the masters, the donkeys in the church, the little girl is running the church, and things like a shake-up of society is really needed, and it's stuffy now because we don't get to shake it up anymore, right? Like the Uranian part doesn't get to do anything. And so what happens is the Uranian part comes through with devastating effects. These lightning, the way that the lightning comes now is devastating. Because it's stuffy in here, It's stuffy in the civilization. So there you go. I just said even more stuff.
Awesome. All great stuff. Melanie, what are you thinking?
I was just really enjoying how you told the story of Icarus.
Me
That
too.
was wonderful. Loved it.
Yeah, I like the idea that I think it was Clarissa Pinkola Estes who I originally heard tell it that way,
Okay.
where he's let down actually by his father in a way that, like he's just for him to say, follow me.
Mm.
Like he's a boy. He doesn't know how to
Mm.
use these wings. And so that's why he gets so close to the water. And I like that better than he gets mesmerized by the sun. I don't think he needs to be mesmerized by the sun. He goes to the sun because he's covered in water, right? Like he starts doing tricks, which the boy will do, the youth will do, right? The young spirit will just be like, oh my God, I can fly. And start doing these crazy tricks, but then that may get him too close to the water, too close to the oceanic, too close to the chaotic, too close to the messy stuff. And then he flies to dry himself off and gets too close to the sun.
So
Yeah.
beautiful. I could bring in another question, which would be, so if we were to be sitting here again, attuning to all of this, attuning to this moment we're in as a collective, etc. If we imagine holding this space, and again, I'm thinking of Cheroklo being in Aquarius, you know, in a sense, holding this Aquarian space like this. Two interweaving questions. One would be, if you're imagining yourself being that kind of Cheroklo energy holding this moment, what is your intention, your hope? What are you feeling in your being as you are that being holding this space, which I think we all are in our own ways? That's number one. And then number two, I think this is what we're really talking about, but what do you feel is the dance that needs to be going on in this moment? Like if we think of existence as a body, which is often how I think of it, right? Like we're collectively doing a dance in the time space realities. And in craniosacral therapy, right, we just sit and we hold the space of the body and we just notice what the body is dancing. How is it moving? Because the body has its own wisdom. So existence has its own wisdom, right? So we're collectively trying to somehow come back to balance or wholeness or healing or something. I don't know. That's my sense. So number one, what are you feeling as the being holding the craniosacral space of existence? It's a big question. And then number two, what do you feel the body of existence doing in its dance right now?
I can just, like, the first thing that came to me is that the nervous system is just jacked up.
And Uranus again, you're Aquarius again.
Yeah.
Yeah, go for
That's
it.
what I feel in the system. It's that if I was holding it as a craniosacral system, it'd be like, whoa, yeah, this is too much. The adrenals, like I'd be saying as a person, what have you been doing? What have you
Wow.
been doing for the last 20 years? You know, because
The last
the
20
yeah,
lifetimes.
20 lifetimes.
Yeah, that's
Because
2000.
it's too much adrenaline, yeah. And
Wow.
the adrenals, of course, as we know, sit upon the kidneys,
Right.
and the kidneys are the battery pack.
Mm,
Um, the kidneys are our batteries.
mm, mm,
Batteries are drained,
mm.
and we're just jacking in more energy.
And
We just
sorry,
keep
and we have
jacking
Mars.
it up.
We have Mars about to go retrograde into Cancer. But anyway, keep going. Yes. Yes. Keep going.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Keep going.
Yeah. So that to me, like the first thing that I felt when you said, what are you feeling in that? It's the nervous system, which of course is Aquarius, Uranus, that kind of thing, right? So, which is why it always feels to me the dance is like, we got to slow down. We're just speeding up, careering off the edge of a cliff here, and we all know it. And we're
Mm.
like, well, more gas, because then we'll be able to, maybe we'll be able to jump this thing. It's like there's no jump. It's just a cliff, you know. And that's what it would be in that craniosacral session. It's like you can't speeding up is not going to get you there, actually. As Melanie said before, there's nowhere to go. Um, it's like a power down that, like I often use this in craniosacral where I've got somebody whose system is jacked. It's like, how do we power down? Like, I even use that lever with the this kind of, we'll do a few of these. We probably need to turn a few of these big generators off in order to reconnect. And I think that's what Pluto wants us to do. It's like, hey, what is human nature? I don't think it's to be 24/7 on. I don't think the news cycle, 24-hour news cycle is really helping us very much. Like, catastrophe, catastrophe, danger, danger, like the world's
Yeah.
about to end, end, end. It's like, because if the world's about to end, we better panic. But I don't think it is. I think we're still going to be here. So maybe we just chill out a little bit here.
Wow.
Mhm.
It's too much,
Well,
guy, isn't it?
when you were talking, Martha, I sort of envisioned something which actually sounds really like what you were describing right now, Chris.
Mm.
Um, I think it maybe has less dramatic impact. What I saw was a lemniscate. You know what a lemniscate is? It's like a figure of eight
Mm.
shape.
Mm.
And the easiest way to think of a lemniscate is if you tore a strip of paper off your A4 pad or whatever, and you then made a circle with the two ends, and then you turn one end over. If you trace round the surface, there's only one surface. So you take something which has a beginning, middle, end, it's sort of two-dimensional thing in a way, three-dimensional. And then you turn one end over, and suddenly it becomes one again. So even though it looks like it's a normal figure of eight, where, it meets in the middle and it's got two shapes on the outside, this one has only one surface. And I'm always like enchanted by this lemniscate thing. If you go on Google Images and look up lemniscate, you'll find some beautiful things. Anyway, so there I was listening to Martha,
Mhm.
and it was like there was this huge lemniscate that filled my entire field of vision, and I didn't really know where to look, so I sort of found myself looking at the place where the two cross over, and so I sort of just carried on looking there, and then it's like the energy was going round and round this lemniscate, and I began to notice that the loops were getting smaller and smaller. Started
Oh.
out filling my field of vision and got smaller, 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 until eventually all that going round and round disappeared.
Mm.
And there was just the point left. There's a pun there. It's like get to the point.
Mhm.
And so that's like a kind of a visual version of what you were describing. At least that's how I heard what you were saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what you're saying, both of you, fits so, of course, so perfectly with um the big message I've been getting as well. Let's see, the day, I'm not going to discuss the United States election. We're not not going to discuss it, but the day before it and the day of, when I was in deep prayer, deep prayer, praying and praying and praying, what I got told over and over again, I actually made a video of it the day after the election about this. What I was getting told was, okay, look, I get it. The human feeling, there are a lot of human feelings about this. You as a human, Martha, have a lot of human feelings about it. But let's come back to the ultimate point here. Regardless of all of that, what needs to happen, what's really going on the planet is that you as humanity are out of whack with regard to you're totally out of alignment with actual life, like the rhythm of real actual, like the earth. You need to come back to the reality that you are Gaia. On a physiological level, you have to slow way the heck down back to like the rhythm, the breathing of this planet, literally, right? And that no matter who wins or doesn't win, like you still are out of whack with that. So please take a deep breath and come back to, this is Gaia speaking, right? Come back to me. So I think that's what you're saying, Chris, is a similar.
Well, there's a concept, as you know, Martha, in cranial sacral called primary respiration, which obviously just means first breath.
Mm.
Um, but I also quite like I don't think it's just jargon to say primary respiration, because there's something quite beautiful about that, because that's the re-spirit restoration, right? That the spirit comes back, and the first spirit comes back. And if somebody does have this nervous system shot, which means they're in freeze, which is most of the planet that's connected to these machines is in some form of freeze. How can you not be? Then you hold. I mean, it happened in a session earlier today, actually. Exactly this thing where it was just, wow, her nervous system's shot. And so we just wait and hold. And then eventually what can happen is like the whole thing kind of like goes back down, and then there can be this thing of like,
Yep.
and it's not, you can't, as Melanie was talking about before, you can't map that, you can't plan for it, you can't like, okay, then we'll do a primary respiration session. It's just kind of you hold and you wait and you wait and you wait, and something subtle is happening where the whole system's going like maybe back to the point, maybe back to the infinity and the point of the point that you were talking about as well, Martha, and somewhere in there is that, and it's back alive, because it's always there. That's the candle of the spirit, is never, ever, ever going to be out. It's never going to be distinguished. We're not in the end days. We're in the middle days. We're in the middle of it all. Actually, let's say that point that's in the middle of it all. We're not coming to some end game thing. It's not like that. I mean, to me, we're sort of like, and one of the other tension points I feel is the need for everything to become really decentralized and also hold the vision that we're all one. So how does that work? I don't know, but something in the Aquarius like mega mind knows, because I do feel like we got to separate all this out. Everybody get out of the same. Like actually, culture works when we're really diverse, when we have many different cultures. This one culture thing is a mess. It's not creating anything beautiful. If you go, I just was in Europe, right? got to go to Greece and Rome and Florence, and it's like, oh, the reason this is created is because they were creating out of their own culture. Their own cultural background gave birth to this. If they were plugged into the world, one big Eye of Mordor thing, it would have been too self-conscious. Those cultures would have been too self-conscious to do anything. And so it's like we gotta again turn the Eye of Mordor, like that's got to go to sleep, that Eye of Mordor, and we just need to sort of like everybody just kind of go. But that's such a great paradox, isn't it? Because somehow we're trying to become one and we're trying to become many in the same moment, right? Because I that's why I'm drawn back and back and back in time to see, well, when did it work? When I go back to ancient Greece, there's no one culture there. You can't refer to it as even Greece. They didn't refer to it as Greece. They referred to it as Athens and Sparta and the Peloponnese and Delphi and Parnassus, as you mentioned earlier. That those were the places, and each one had a distinct language, time. That was a really important one, right? They measured time differently because they were seeing different rituals and different festivals, and that's what. So you'd go to a different place and you'd have to ask, what time is it? What time of year is it? What's the season we're in? You'd have to get that because you couldn't just assume. And this whole time is a huge part of this. The controlling of time is a huge part of this. And it's a great irony because how could the three of us meet if we can't say what you said at the beginning of our video, that we met at 12 and 5 and 9? We all know that time and it's very useful, but it has a really bad, really dark edge to it. That we're all on the same time, that we're all in the same culture. We're not really. The what happens in Uranus's story in the end is the birth of Venus, right? The birth of Aphrodite happens out of the great catastrophe that is the tension between Saturn and Uranus. Just to repeat what we must all know, it's Saturn cutting off his testicles, Uranus's testicles, throwing them into the ocean. The Furies have started there. The Giants have started as well. And when they bubble up, Aphrodite, the frost, she comes out of that frost and beauty is reborn. I feel like we're always on the cusp of beauty being reborn. And I think the world needs it now more than ever. That woman, that goddess, Aphrodite, truth, wisdom, beauty, knowing, somewhere way deeper than this machine that we have on our heads, or this machine that we're watching on here or talking into. That there's something else.
Mm. Gorgeous.
I feel like I just waxed lyrical a little.
Oh no.
No, no, that was beautiful.
I had something pop in and then it just popped out. I was
That's
about
what,
to.
get used to it. 20 years we got to that.
It was something. Oh wait, what was it? Uh, oh,
Is it
go
still
what?
around? No, I'm thinking, is it still around? I'm trying to
Yeah.
track your
Well, there are
lightning.
two components for me. One is, as we're talking about all of this, of course, I think it is really, really significant and important that Uranus is in Taurus right now,
Ah,
as Pluto has done the shift.
yeah.
It's not yet in Gemini. It's not. And yeah, so that for me is part of what brings me back to this that original breath, or the, the rhythm of the earth, and our need to come back to that still point, that that point where everything, the respiration can re-begin, or Venus, Aphrodite can be reborn, or I don't, all of that. Something about Uranus being in Taurus is very key to me there. Yeah, so that's one thing. Uh oh, I know what it was. I know what it was. I know what I wanted to say. Yes, okay. This is what I wanted to ask or bring in maybe for our last component. When we're talking about Uranus and Saturn and the dance between the two, before we were starting to record, Melanie, you brought up Chiron and the role of Chiron in all of this. So I don't know if we just want to stick that in there before we end, because it does feel really important to me. Is there anything you feel called to say about that?
Well, because Chiron was physically discovered in between the orbits of Saturn and Uranus, um, ever since I first learned that, somehow that image of Chiron not only orbiting between them, but actually going through the orbit of Saturn and out. It doesn't cross over the orbital path of Uranus, but it goes into the inner sphere, as it's called, of Uranus. So very much linking the two together. And I think of that like sewing, sewing or weaving together. And Chiron spends, if I'm remembering correctly, it's about 13% of its 50-year orbit, 51 years, actually inside Saturn's orbit, so between Jupiter and Saturn. So, in other words, the three planets that we've been calling by name, uh, Saturn and Jupiter and Uranus, those are your three rulers of the sign of Aquarius.
Mm, 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 mm.
And to me, they kind of sit as I was going to say a constellation, and I don't now mean that in the astronomical sense, but their themes configure there in the astronomy.
Yes.
And so I've always kind of thought of them and rethought of them, etc., as a kind of a trio linked together, even visually. You can see Saturn going through. And the way I understand that, and this is really from my own experience of living with the process of Chiron, this is not so much just an intellectual speculation, it's just a comment on what I've seen. It's as if this round and round orbit of Chiron that goes through Saturn's orbit, it reminds us that in the process of awakening, so that's Uranus, let's say, for the sake of this description, in the process of awakening, it's not a straight line. We don't go from the darkness into the light, as one might think if you read some, old books of spiritual philosophy and so forth. It can get to be very linear. And of course, when it's very linear, all it does is just create its own shadow. And it's all about rise and fall or overthrowing, the whole Uranus story in the Greek mythology. It's all about violence and overthrowing and so on and so forth. But there are ways in which our consciousness doesn't quite work in that way. It additionally works in a kind of spiral dance, So to me, the orbits of Saturn and Uranus, when we put Chiron in there, remind us that there may be old, previously established patterns that we need to visit and revisit until we don't need to revisit them anymore. And we're not as in control of that as we would like to think. The idea that, I'm going to like work on my stuff, I'll get through this pattern and I'll, crack it and be free and all that. It's not exactly that that's false, but it's not really how things work. It's very rare that one makes the jump all at once and is able to sustain a higher level of consciousness or a deeper kind of awakening without faltering, like in one go. There are people who we're told that has happened to, who are living on Earth. But I think, for the Joe averages like us, I don't think that's the pattern of how it goes.
No.
And I don't think that's only about belief. There is something about the way we're wired, that there is this elegant kind of spiral movement that we're engaged with, whether we're even aware of it or not. And so that always comes to mind. And then, of course, the wife of Chiron, Chariclo, now she doesn't cut through anybody else's orbit. It's like she minds her own business, right? She doesn't overthrow or, cut through or do anything like that. But she kind of sits there in between. And she's the largest of all known centaurs so far and has the most stable orbit. Chiron apparently has the least stable orbit. So that's a very interesting pair. But I so love the image of Chariclo just gently weaving in between these two really quite extreme opposites, which do represent different worldviews. Either of which can become fixed. It depends which side you're focusing on. And I'm remembering now a woodcut back from the 16th century, I think, around the time of Galileo's revelation. And it's two philosophers dressed in robes, as noble men did. And one is holding like an astrolabe, an image of the globe of the earth, and he's holding that by a stick from underneath. And I think one of them's pointing, or both of them are pointing. But the title of this image, which I wish I'd thought of hunting out because I've got a copy of it, the title is A Dialogue Between Two Worldviews. And here they've been personified. The two worldviews have been personified. And they're having a dialogue and pointing to the earth and all of that.
Mm.
So to me, that's an image which I find very inspiring. So rather than kind of shouting each other down or blaming each other or having to be right and wanting to conquer the other person in the debate, or, any of that stuff. You know, to have a kind of graceful, civilized kind of dialogue was to me a very inspiring image, and how interesting. I mean, I would say that, you know, I am a Gemini, but the notion of proper dialogue, not just a shouting match or a situation where one person is going to risk being cancelled for sure, you know, but the
Mhm.
art of dialogue and the art of
Mhm.
relating in that almost formal way. So I'm thinking here Gemini, Libra, and if brought together in Aquarius, that in the right setting could be such an literally enlightening kind of dialogue, conversation, discussion. If it's removed from the field of somebody has to be right or someone has to conquer, someone has to win, someone has to lose, and all of that, but just to really exchange. So to me, Chiron and his wife, his lady wife, they sit in that space between the two worldviews.
And again, I go that back, I get taken back to that beginning of time before time place, right? Where it's like the love is what all that I feel there. And then I feel this like simplicity where there's this just this inherent desire to, of course, I'm going to fully be with your reality and I'm going to be fully with your, of course, like there's nothing threatening because there's no threat. so, so that it's just pure purity, you know, just, yeah. Chris, your face.
Yeah, I'm just really inspired by that, Melanie. Where you went with that is that really puts the nail, it hits the nail on the head for me. It is that beautiful image as well to give us there, the dialogue between worldviews and the image of the people holding the world. It's like we can't encapsulate the world with our view, you know. That's back
Mm.
to my thing about overview and oversight, right? Like you're going to have oversights in there. And the only way to fix up those oversights is to have someone with an opposing worldview come in and also give you their thing. And I think what
Mm-hmm.
makes this Aquarian and not Piscean, and if we can be careful about that, so in our own thinking about this, is that both sides hold their positions, actually, because it is fixed. And they hold their positions, and as you said, the word is civilized. They're civilized about it. That they are able to hold an enlightening conversation for all of us that are listening, you know? Like, I mean, I've watched some things on YouTube from back in the 70s, and you'd have like you know, two intellectual, a room full of people, right, just sitting in their chairs with their notebooks and things, and two intellectual heavyweights arguing on stage, and the people just going like, "Oh my God, yeah, I didn't really, oh wow," you know, just reveling in it. It's amazing, you know. This person's
Mm.
coming from postmodernism, and this one's coming from, you know, whatever it is, but they're able to come. Well, here's my worldview that I've worked hard at, so I'm not just going to give it up. But I want to put it to the test of your worldview. Now let's go. You know, where did that go? Where is that? Because as you said, it's shouting matches, it's lowest common denominator, it's clickbait, and it ends up just being, well, you know, that my reflection on this election that we're not talking about it is that it just became like, what? There are big things happening in the world. We're going to ignore them? Nobody's going to talk about them because it's
Mm.
just like, well, you get your votes by talking about this thing, or you get your votes talking about this thing, and then completely separate from each other, and they don't meet to have that conversation that we're all longing for. You know, that to me is like, I don't want to be in my echo chamber. My
Mm.
intellect wants to be in the presence of intellectual heavyweights, whoever they are. I don't care who they are. I just want them to debate, and I want to be
Mm.
witness to it. Because the
So,
magical third thing can arise out of that that is not Saturn and is not Uranus. The magical third thing is something birthed out of that, which maybe is centaur-like in the sense that it's part this, part that. But you know, to
Mm.
us, um, not awakened, not enlightened folk, you know, we need to be able to take that all in. And I think there's a real longing for that.
Yes.
Pretty close there.
So can I bring back in Chiron for a second?
Yeah.
Because what I'm thinking as you're talking is, okay, so we feel like, okay, so this is the day that Pluto moved into Aquarius. Let's move Pluto now into Aquarius because that's where it is. Okay, so I'm gonna do right now. Here are the current transits. Here's Pluto now in Aquarius. Okay. Okay, so we can have this narrative that goes, yay, Pluto is now in Aquarius. And and of course, I mean that's overly simplistic to begin with, but the reality is that all of this, whatever went on with Pluto in these end degrees of Capricorn, still exists. It hasn't gone away, right? And now we have Chiron, and actually, interestingly, Hygeia, but for a longer period of time, Chiron squaring that. All of that, what was getting transited by Pluto, is now getting squared by Chiron. So it's still being addressed, just in a Chironic way, if that's a word, versus a Plutonian way, right? Like, so thoughts, feelings?
Definitely deferring to Melanie on this one.
Yeah. The Chiron.
Oh. Well, as I mentioned a little while back, ever since I knew that Chiron had been discovered in between Saturn and Uranus, it's like I can't think of them, Saturn and Uranus, without remembering that image, which has been alive for me in all sorts of ways, And what you mentioned there about Pluto being or having been right at the end of Capricorn. So there are other planets coming to the end of their particular signs.
Yes.
And
Yes.
in a way, so that anaretic degree, as it's sometimes called, the last degree, already has been resonating so strongly with Pluto there. And then the anaretic degree of Pisces also, and that goes on also into next year. And then we will also have the anaretic degree of Taurus being visited by Uranus. That doesn't have the feeling of it hanging around forever because it is Uranus, it doesn't really hang around forever. But moving on into Gemini. And so almost wherever one looks, it's the same polarity. So back to Saturn and Uranus, that's the old world, Saturn, and the new world. Thinking of that image I described, that I don't know if it's a woodcut or an engraving, but that picture of the dialogue between the different worldviews. And simply because the world that Saturn represents at one level is the visible, the world that is appreciated through the five senses. And that is a really sharp edge, because what comes next is Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, all discovered with maths and technology rather than with the naked eye, as we call it, the naked eye, meaning in the world of the senses. So that's almost emblematic of the very divide, in quotes, that we all live with our lives. Our total experience includes what can be appreciated via the five senses, and also what is beyond that. And learning our own particular ways of engaging with that interface. Well, to quote Barbara Hand Clough, who wrote a marvelous book on Chiron. She calls Chiron the rainbow bridge. And it's the bridge between two worlds or between dimensions. And however one describes or defines what are the other worlds or dimensions, it really comes back to a similar thing. And maybe I'm just kind of simple, but I always think, well, we do live on a planet where the shape of our day is created by day and night. So we've got these contrasts, this time of darkness and this time of light within 24 hours. We've got that embedded right into our earthly experience of being alive in a body on this planet. So in my way of thinking, that's not something to ignore or deny or even to transcend. It's how do we work intelligently with this for the sake of unity, for the sake of preventing the duality that we live and on one level that we are. How do we work with that in such a way as to prevent it from just falling into violence and competition and the wrong kind of discrimination, And I think it's by recognizing that it's there rather than sitting under the imposition of some kind of notion, which will be an ideology that's being imposed by the collective, by the state, by the rulers of the state, by the rulers of the kingdom, the royalty, etc., etc. And we can be very subtly imposed upon by the collective, and finding our ways out of that prison is part of the territory, I think. I'm sort of just summarizing things that both of you have already said.
And bringing together a lot of different images that we talked about today. But I will add the third thing of day and night is twilight, right? And so,
Yes.
and I do think Hermes is the one to call forward, because we need that guide. We need the psychopomp. We need someone that can bridge worlds, as you said, with the rainbow bridge. And to me, that is and has always been, at least for the Greeks, it was Hermes, who knows his way around,
Mm-hmm.
And actually Hermes in Pluto and Aquarius, right? Well, Hermes can go to Hades, and he can also go to the top of Mount Olympus. He's got free passage, and
Yes.
I think it's that freedom of mind. Because
Yeah.
Hermes is not necessarily Mercury here in the sense of the planet. Hermes is the one that might be able to move through all the signs, but particularly the air signs, and take us back and forth in between. It's like, hey, we're missing some Libran beauty here, or we're missing like a really good Gemini-like debate, or actually this is getting a bit fuzzy. We should like lock in some positions so that we can have a better, like this kind of thing. Let's play and invite the play of the Hermetic, invite the play of the trickster, which also invites the sneaking past the guards in a way, because Hermes is also alchemy and Hermeticism, and
Yes,
invites us into
yes,
Gnosticism and actually getting felt experiences of the divine, not just like, oh, because the priest said, which we have still in multiple different layers, like, well, the priest said this, so, or that,
exactly.
whatever you can insert into priest, whatever you want these days. It's like, no, it's not good enough anymore. We need Gnostics, right? We need to reinvigorate the essence of experience of all the worlds. And that's got to be because that's the dialogues that we're looking for, right? It's
Mhm.
got to be, we got to get the people in the room. We got to hear this, because otherwise it just feels like, and this is also Pluto and Aquarius, the thing we're looking at is not real. It doesn't seem real to me. It seems like a show and a pageantry and a theater, but not real. It doesn't feel like that for me. But if you put it out there and have the debates again and have that sense of like, yeah, we are all in it together, but there's also hierarchies, and that doesn't mean it's dominance hierarchies. There's also, growth hierarchies. So it's okay that some people are better at some things and some people are worse at others. That's actually how it works. It's like, I mean, I taught kindergarten, right? You put 20 kids in a room and they will create hierarchies within a week. Within a week, they'll already have a hierarchy. And that's not because it was imposed on them by me. I was trying not to get hierarchies, but it just naturally emerges in the field. And so how does this field dynamic, like how do we reinvigorate that? Get back to that primary respiration, right? That primary breath, because we're all kind of like exhausted, you know, but sort of like come back and go, okay, let's have a good, sober, Aquarian, logical, rational look at this, you know? Let's start with that.
Yeah.
And I just think there's a potential for this again, because we're all, what I'm encouraged by with Pluto and Aquarius, if I just feel into the astrological, symbolism of that, is that I think Pluto is truth and Aquarius is truth, but they're two different ways of getting at truth. And I think that revelation that Pluto is going to give us is like, well, we've already seen that when Pluto is in Capricorn. Imagine it in Aquarius, what are we going to be able to see now that was not visible to us? The I see, I can't see, that was not visible to us before. What are we going to be able to see now that can't be hidden anymore? And then what are we going to do about that?
And I can just throw in one quick thought about the Chiron coming along to now square where Pluto was transiting, is maybe if Pluto has gone along and helped us to unearth and see these things, right? Maybe Chiron comes along. Again, Melanie's the expert over here. But one way I feel it is is maybe Chiron is one of those bridges, of course, right? Half horse, half man, etc. All of that, earth and all of it. Is helping us to hold this healing and to be the bridge to all these things that maybe felt more painful or more acutely something in our personal lives, in our world. Maybe that Chiron energy is part of what can help now to do the next level, right? Like, okay, we're not just going to go polarizing everything. We need to actually bring things together. And then Cheriklo, his wife, sitting there in Aquarius, having her role of the healing, her healing presence, which is a different role, but she's also there, right? She's like, they're both, I can feel how they're both helping us maybe with this Pluto dance that's going on. Yeah. Wonderful. I feel like we should bring this to a close so Chris can go to sleep. And it's now almost midnight your time.
I want to say one last thing before we
Yes,
close
go for
out
it.
there,
Yes.
because earlier I talked about process-oriented psychotherapy,
Mm.
and there was something Arnold Mandel, who died this year, actually, may rest wherever he is, where he did something called world work. So he would get factioned off communities in a room, like he'd be in he'd be in downtown LA kind of thing, and he'd have the blacks, Latino, and whites in a room, and with like a panel of world workers, like so process workers, and they just hold it and hold it and hold it until the thing started to express itself in it, and it'd start quite violently because it's dangerous. The world is so fractioned right now that we have to be willing to go to dangerous places. And he'd hold that, point out things that were happening in the field that everybody could see, not take a side, and he had his whole panel to help him with it, but allow the pressure cooker to let off all of its steam. And then time and again, by the end of this, they're all kind of like connecting, because they love each other, but they blame each other for their lives. So it's understandable if you blame someone for your life, you're going to hate them as a species, or as a subspecies, or whatever, as a race. But you put them in the room and it just naturally starts to work itself out with the right skills. And I think that's the investment in that level of skills, not personal therapy. I am a personal therapist and I still believe in it, but it's that next level of therapy where it's holding big containers. I really think that's the level of skills that we need for this next era, because it's not individual. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not an individual thing anymore.
Yeah.
But when you see this thing happen in the room, and I saw Michael Mead hold it when I was in his thing as well, you know, like when I was in the Redwoods in Mendocino, he held it and it would organize itself and he'd encourage the fire to come up, you know. His one rule was no physical violence. That was his only rule. And then he'd encourage the fire to come up. And by the end of this, we're all hugging each other, you know, we're all singing with each other, we're all in it together. We've all said all our bullshit to each other, and now we're just like, we can see each other again. The veil comes down. And I think that again is the Aquarian image. Like the veil comes down and we can actually see, no, I get it now. And I've been acting out this thing. I've been like in a trance. I've been possessed by something, but now I can actually see, and I can only do that by putting it in the chrysalis. You know, we have to get back in there, and that's Pluto and Aquarius. We're all heading in to the underworld. We're all going to be spending our time in that chrysalis. You know, obviously not all the time. That's ridiculous, but we are being encouraged to sort of like be in the pressure cooker and then come out of that like these big shamanic processes, but with the group, you know, and with
Yeah.
people that you disagree with. That's where it's got to happen.
Yeah. That is a whole big topic. But I was actually just reflecting on that last night, how my spirit world is saying to me for my work, they're saying take a step back, right? So I also feel like
Exactly.
yeah, in this, I feel the role of Chiron, which I feel like I have a very strong Chiron in my own chart, right? But it's more of a hands-on type of healing in a sense. And then the Cheroklo is the step way back and just hold the space. And maybe even the Cheroklo in Aquarius, it's like what I'm being told is to step way back. And my particular role is the big picture, like the big groups. And what I've even noticed in my own work this past year is, of course, I enjoy one-on-one work, but where I see people making these humongous life-changing change, like really transforming, is in the groups I'm holding. And I'm going, wow. And so for me, the spirit world is saying, step back even further, like even more, go back. Right. And yeah, I feel that so much, that of course, there's need for that direct hands-on stuff, of course. Everything has its own place, but yes, this bigger picture space holding for us as a collective feels really, 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 really important right now. Maybe always, but definitely. Yeah. Okay. 2 hours later. um any last thing? Any last thing? For people, what, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think we made it to the end of the chronological time. I'm definitely at the end of
Yeah,
my
yeah.
clock over here.
You're about to cross over into the next day, Chris. So
Exactly.
yeah,
I'm at the edge. I'm
yeah,
at the
you're
cusp
right
of
there.
tomorrow. I'll tell you
Your
guys all
eyes
about it.
are closing. Yeah. Um, okay, so if we're to close just with, very simple, for people listening, what is the one takeaway prayer wish we would send into the world and send into this collective healing space that we're all a part of? One word, one phrase.
Well, I'll drop a little cliche on you, which I love because some cliches, they just have the resonance anyway, you know. And the one for me is that we're all in it together.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've come back to there's a beautiful Australian song and it's just a nice little melody, but it's basically that we're all in it together. And that can be very heartening to remember, I think.
Mhm.
It is very true.
Literally true.
Cliche as it may be. Yeah.
Here we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. Melanie?
I think something about the value of silence. And that doesn't mean, that you don't have to speak or you don't, or that you shouldn't be listening to the radio or reading or doing whatever busy stuff you get into. But something about the silence, which underpins that and to which we return or can return. It's a very noisy world at the moment on all sorts of levels. But I think, yeah, to allow ourselves really the silence, just for its own sake, not for anything.
Yeah. And I would throw in mine, which would tie in with that, both of what you said, and come back to your image of that infinity sign with the point, right? And that still point. And that's where my being is drawn, is just this reminder of us all. We're all in it together. We're all literally in the chrysalis of the time-space continuum of existence, whatever you want to conceptualize it as. And yeah, that would be my prayer, is that we're able to take a deep breath and feel that reality that we are held, and we do have the choice to be in that silence and that deep place and come back to that original breath, that respiration, that beginning of time, love. Awesome. Okay. So
Yeah, and also that these things that look like twos are usually threes, including inhale, pause, exhale.
beautiful.
There's always a third thing around: day, night, twilight.
Magical third thing.
Yeah.
Mm. Great. Okay, on a very practical level, just anything that you guys want to say. Melanie, I know that you have your 12 nights gathering.
Oh yes, the 12 Holy Nights
Yes. Do you have?
process that goes through from just before Christmas until the 6th of January.
Mhm.
And there's more information about that on my website if anybody's interested.
And I did it last year. Super beautiful. I know, Chris, you've done it too, right? And several
I
times.
did it with Melanie, and we were teaching yoga sort of together. It was a beautiful,
Yeah,
wonderful experience.
Amazing.
yeah,
Yeah,
that was
incredible.
wonderful.
Mm. Yeah. So, and to find Melanie, of course, go to melanie.reinhart.com.
Mm.
Yeah, melanie.reinhart.com. I'll put all of our information with this video. Chris, if I highly recommend going to his podcast on the soulsterms.com. Is it
Yeah, the website is on the soulsterms.com.
okay.
Yeah.
And then on the Souls Terms, the podcast is on the website, but also on Spotify, Apple, now on YouTube,
Now on
uh,
YouTube,
all the
everywhere
things.
else.
All the
Yeah.
things. Is there anything you want to say about your individual work or anything?
I am organizing a retreat in Greece with Colette Davis, where there'll be myth and movement. Colette's an amazing yoga teacher and philosopher, many different things, but the two of us will be running something in June next year that we're cooking up. Go to the website and join the mailing list, because I am going to start an actual newsletter pretty soon.
Good job. Good job.
Once I have that silent breath and
Yeah.
can get my head around that, then that's what I'll be doing. But I'm really excited to do that with Colette. We've got this beautiful place. We're going to be going to Epidaurus and Delphi and even visiting the sites at Eleusis as well. So we'll be kind of doing the Pluto, the Neptunian, and going and visit the Oracle as well. So plus lots of integration, lots of silence, lots of movement, lots of storytelling, dream work. It's going to be really special, actually. So yeah, Colette and I have been cooking that up for the last month or so.
Sounds amazing.
Mm,
Amazing.
mm.
Yeah, and then I'll say for me, I have three things coming in 2025. And one is I'm going to be redoing the Astrology 101 course that the two of you both have been part of this past year. That's going to be restarting in February. And then in April, I'm going to be starting a stars course, which Chris is also part of, live for that. And that'll be a year-long thing. And both of you are going to be speakers in this free summit that I'm hosting in March of 2025. So things, always things, many things. Wonderful. Okay, does that cover it all?
I think so.
Okay. Well, just want to say thanks to both of you and anybody watching. I can truly say that was a well-spent afternoon in my case, because it's the middle of the day, or was the middle of the day for me. It's now late afternoon.
Yes, well spent early morning for me, definitely, for sure.
Yeah, and the evening. Thanks to both of you guys. Yet again, beautiful, covered some great ground here, and it feels very like a really soulful and respectful and reverent was one of the words you used before, Melanie. Real reverence for this art and this craft that we're doing here. And yeah, it feels like that, like a really good soulful reverence to the subject matter that we're into today.
I agree. All right. Thank you everybody for watching, and we would love, of course, your thoughts, feelings. Please share with us anything you feel called to share. And thank you so much for watching. And we'll see you soon.